This is a relay project.
Real Talk starts right now. Here's Ryan Jespersen.
Well, it's great to be back with you, Real Talkers, after a Thanksgiving long weekend. I trust that you and your loved ones had a blessed one. Nice to be back in the house with the show's intrepid producer, John Hicks.
Hi-yo.
We actually insisted, Johnny, that you take up to 48 hours of downtime, not DJ any parties, not work any events. How was it? I saw your Instagram stories. It looks like you were a menace in the kitchen in a good way.
Yeah, I did most of the cooking, although I leave the main part, the turkey part, to my partner, because I tend to like watch the hockey game or like walk around, and I always end up messing it up. How was yours?
Did you guys went with some turkey this year?
Well, no, we went with tofurkey.
I thought I maybe caught you in a bit of an interesting situation.
No.
How was the tofurkey?
It's great.
Yeah, it's not too bad.
From our friends at Freezin' Bros.
Oh, I love it. Yeah, we've got a mention coming up with those beauties. They sent me a note, by the way. They heard 13-time pro rodeo announcer of the year, Brett Gardner, talking about the Freezin' Brothers sticky cinnamon buns, those sourdough cinnamon buns, and they're like, can you please pass along his contact info? I think the Gardner's got some. He's got some cinnamon buns coming his way. Ours was wonderful. Spent some time on the family farm in Saskatchewan.
Beautiful.
Everybody can check out my Instagram stories if they want to see some insights into that. We've got a special edition of the show today, and I wonder if on the heels of Thanksgiving, on the heels of time with family, an extra day away from work, maybe an extra glass of wine or two, maybe an extra rye ginger or two. There might be some people this morning that are kind of rubbing their eyes a little bit more than usual. People feeling a little banged up. People playing guilty, as we say. This episode is for you. We've been looking forward to talking to Maureen Palmer and Mike Pond for a while. They've got a new book out together. You can check out youdon'thavetoquit.com. The book, You Don't Have to Quit, 20 science-based strategies to help your loved one drink less. The two of them have a fascinating story, and this is interesting subject matter, particularly at this time of year. In the month of October, a lot of people are observing Sober October, or Art Sober as it flows together. And so we're looking forward to a conversation that may be challenging for some of you, maybe including me. We'll find out, but those two coming up in just 30 seconds. I wanted to let you know this episode is happening with the support of Business Career College. You can find them online at businesscareercollege.com. Financial training leaders since 1997, and they've got a new designation program for financial advisors and senior finance professionals. This is the Certified Digital Asset Advisor designation. The new generation of investors wants to know more about adding digital assets to their financial portfolios. That's what they're saying. And so they have questions about things like NFTs and decentralized finance and the blockchain and Bitcoin and the whole nine yards. You want to be able to advise them with credibility, with insight, right? Why not future-proof your career along the way? You can learn more about the CDAA online, and when you invest in that training course, don't forget the promo code Ryan20. That's all one word, Ryan20. A 20% discount on that CDAA course at businesscareercollege.com. Mike Pond is a Victoria-based harm reduction psychotherapist who specializes in treating substance use disorders. 30 years of practice combined with Mike's own life-threatening battle with alcohol leaves him uniquely qualified in this space. As a matter of fact, as we're about to hear, Mike lost everything to alcohol. His family, his home, his practice, ended up homeless on Vancouver's downtown east side until he became sober in 2010. He's joining us this morning alongside Maureen Palmer, an author, journalist, longtime filmmaker. As a matter of fact, for more than 20 years, she was an award-winning senior producer for both radio and TV at the CBC until she formed Bountiful Films with Helen Slinger. They've produced about 20 years worth of critically acclaimed documentaries, including Wasted for David Suzuki's The Nature of Things, which followed her partner Mike's search for evidence-based addiction treatment. Yeah. The same Mike that's joining us today. What a pleasure it is to welcome Mike Pond and Maureen Palmer to the show. Thank you for making time for us, both of you. Mike, is this something that's difficult to talk about? I almost, we're reading this intro. Your life story essentially boiled down to a few sentences, and I feel like, gosh, this is just cutting right to the heart of the matter without any small talk off the top.
No, there's not much small talk anymore in my life, that's for sure.
Mm.
And Ryan, sometimes it is still difficult because it brings up some of those memories, of course, and the difficult situations that I was in. But mostly it's what I do, it's what I talk about. It's just a big part of my life, and it's a natural thing now, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, well, we're grateful to have you here talking about it. I guess 14 years now of sobriety under your belt and helping others with their own substance use disorder. I know you'll have a captive audience here today. Maureen, is this a first for you? You're producing films, telling compelling stories. Nothing new to you, but this one hits close to home.
Well, two things. Number one, and I'm sure we'll explore some of this. I would say, and Mike would say, that he's mostly sober. About once or twice a year, there's the odd slip. And it's because of those slips that I realized, and this is my core challenge professionally and personally, that I thought I was a good communicator. But when it comes to talking effectively about alcohol, I was so, controlled by the myths that are so prevalent about alcohol use in our society, and so frightened about, our lives spiraling downwards, a catastrophic loss again of everything, that I realized that how I was communicating with Mike, based upon some of the research I'd done, was completely ineffective. And in fact, how I was talking to him was making those rare bouts worse.
Interesting. So okay, I have a million questions after our first 1 minute here together. So mostly sober. So like on Thanksgiving weekend, although Maureen, you described them as slips, which leads me to believe that they're not intentional moments. So Mike, like, you're with the family at Thanksgiving and you decide to maybe have a glass of wine with turkey. Do you get a couple looks from around the table? Do folks go, uh-oh, slippery slope? Like, take us through your day-to-day or your month-to-month 15 years later.
It's interesting, Ryan. Those are not the times when I'll drink, right, in those social situations. They're different kind of times, and there's certain things that are going on for me kind of mentally, emotionally, psychologically, that I'll make a decision about drinking again. And that, like Maureen said, it might be once or twice a year, and it might last an evening, and then I'm done, right? But I had 5.5 years sobriety when I first sobered up in 2009, and we were so focused on rebuilding my life, and then rebuilding my practice and establishing that, and just getting back into the functioning, overall functioning in life in general. And then something happened. It was around Christmas time, and it was a family-related issue, and I decided to drink again. And as I said, that was the first time in 5.5 years. And so since then, there are these episodes, right, of drinking that I have. And I have a lot of insight into why it happens and what's going on for me. That's what I do for a living. I'm a psychotherapist, so I can kind of analyze what's going on in my own mind. But I have the episodes, and then they're over, and they're short-lived. And at first, tremendous shame and guilt. And, the first episode was when we were filming. We just started filming the documentary. And because we were in these settings, right, like the downtown east side, or going back to Penticton in my hometown and around my home and my offices, and doing the filming and take after take after take. And we didn't realize at the time how much that was affecting me, how much that was triggering and activating a lot of unpleasant memories and experiences. And that's when I opened the fridge, and there was, a bottle of Chardonnay in the fridge, and there always was. Like, it was never an issue for me because Maureen would drink socially, but that night I drank it. And that incident then became a part of the documentary. It wasn't the intention. The producers, CBC producers, and Nature Things, that said, "Are you okay with us, including this in the documentary?" And so that became a part of I guess, my own personal and professional search for evidence-based treatments and challenging the existing kind of system of the abstinence-only, mostly 12-step model.
Like Alcoholics Anonymous is the one that we hear of most frequently, right? The 12 steps, hi, my name is fill in the blank, I'm an alcoholic, that type of idea. I want to dig into what evidence-based treatment looks like and why it's significant to mention evidence-based. But Maureen, this is a journey that you're walking as well. So you say to us, you're realizing over time that you're not talking about this the right way. You're not approaching this the right way. You're walking along with him on this journey. So how did you learn those lessons? What did you have to learn?
I learned all of those lessons while filming that documentary because I had the great gift of talking to some of the world's experts on things that motivate behavior change, and also some practical things like medications that are proven to reduce substance use. But the biggest sort of light bulb moment for me was when we interviewed Dr. William Miller, who is the father of motivational interviewing. And one of the things he found out when he was creating motivational interviewing was that when we push, when we say, like I would say to Mike, this is serious, you need to change, you're going to make us lose everything. What I'm actually doing is I'm building up resistance in him. It is a natural human condition, says Dr. Miller. When we're confronted with one side of an argument, we present the other. So in effect, Mike was setting himself up to talk himself out of change. I realized that the more I spoke with empathy, with compassion, and used some of the tools of motivational interviewing and another evidence-based therapy called CRAFT, community reinforcement and family training, that what Dr. Miller's research said would happen, happened, which is after that first initial bout of drinking, 5.5 years in sober, there was a fair bit more drinking. But over time, those periods got fewer and fewer, and they got farther and farther apart until they're now once or twice a year. And inevitably, in my mind, Mike would probably agree, they're PTSD triggered events that are about some kind of family rupture. And those family ruptures are all healed, but the memory of them can be so hurtful. So I learned to talk in a much nicer way, actually, to Mike and probably pretty well everybody else in my life.
It's interesting to hear, like, our live chat is with us on this morning, for context, right? This is the morning after the Thanksgiving long weekend. So for a lot of people, it's like a completely different scenario than your average everyday week, right? Lauren in here says, alcohol nearly destroyed my son, says he's now a pothead. But it's much better. He says it's still an addiction, but it's more preferable, says Lauren. Tracy says this year one of the adults had one drink. Others had iced tea or pop in their wine or drink glasses. It seemed to be just as good. It's so nice to be high on friends and family. How about that one? Shout out to Kimberly. Kimberly says Kimberly's on day 45. You go, girl. She says this weekend was,
congratulations.
Yeah, she says this is the first day that I felt bored. She says I didn't want to drink, but I felt like it was missing. Maybe I just don't like being with my family without it. Says Kimberly, which is kind of interesting. But this would be like, Mike, for a lot of people, maybe a stressful family time, or maybe, Thanksgiving traditions, or maybe being offered booze when you're not typically, these types of moments for some folks could be really difficult ones, especially in the context of talking about relapse or the stumbling blocks, or however you refer to them.
Yeah. Relapse is another word that I tend to not use so much, even formally in my work, but because it's equated with fail, right? The way that we've been conditioned to experience alcohol in terms of being problematic and trying to treat it is that, the longer my term of sobriety, the more, the degree of success I've had. And so there seems to be that factor that's involved in this. And so if I drink again, if I relapse, then it's a fail. I have to go back and start at square one again. And that's so, it's so difficult to deal with, right? But when we're in situations like you're talking about Thanksgiving, and these episodes of drinking again, for me and most of my clients, I've discovered that over the years, it's typically around some kind of family dynamic, right? Where there's something that happens in the family that reignites maybe a historical conflict or tension. And for me, even in my relationship with Mo, there might have been something, Maureen, something might have been going on in our relationship that I was upset about, or maybe something happened in my relationship with one of my sons. And that seems to be something that activates the mind, the brain, to consider drinking, right? Because we drink for the effect. And what is the effect? Well, we get that initial kind of numbing and sense of comfort or feeling consoled and relief. And so that's a powerful drive, right, in the human brain and the mind. And when you've been doing that historically for most of your life, then it will go back to that. And so, yeah, it's these family situations that can be celebratory or also can result in an episode that could be difficult with the drinking.
Maureen, you look like you've got something to say.
But I want to talk a little bit about how I handle these slips, right?
Yeah.
First of all, you would think that I would see them coming because I know, generally speaking, the dynamics that create them, but they still almost always seem to be a bit of a surprise. And then I notice that Mike is redder than usual, a bit more loquacious. And then I realize, oh, there's been some drinking. And what I do is I say something as much as I possibly can that's kind, like, okay, you've been drinking. I think I'm just going to go in the other room and read a book. I am here for you when you need me, and let's pick this up in the morning, right? And then the next morning, what I've tried to do, and what I found to be most effective, is to not talk about the drinking. The mornings where I'm like, why did you drink? It only exacerbates the length of time that Michael deals with difficult emotions. If I can let it go, and then a few days later, Michael will go back. He'll bring us back to it. And we'll have a really good conversation about what happened and why it happened. And the less I talk about it, the faster he returns to this period of equilibrium. And I've learned that I could get upset about those 2 days of drinking, or I could say, thank you so much for those 363 days where there's no drinking, and build a life with Mike that bolsters his willpower, to use a bad word, Mike, maybe, to keep him in a place where in a world of any positive change, which is where we're hoping we can get most people to think about alcohol, because I guess it's 1/3 of adult Americans drink too much, but 90% of them don't have a dependence. They might never develop an alcohol use disorder, but they will develop heart disease or cancer or diabetes, the 200 conditions that are associated with too much drinking. If we could dismantle some of the mythology, like you have to hit rock bottom, so that we could have early, loving conversations about alcohol, we might be able to head 1 million alcohol use disorders off at the pass and just enhance those quality of life years when we get older. That alcohol really diminishes, especially dementia.
How do the two of you, or Mike, let me ask you as an addictions therapist, how do you just define drinking too much? Like, what's the definition of drinking too much? Your family doctor might give you a different answer than your spouse, who might give you a different answer than your employer, which might be a different answer than what you know to be true for yourself, right?
Yeah, and there are these standard drink, I guess, measures, right, that have been established, where you can, I can have 14 drinks in a week, and that's actually been changed recently, where it's down to two drinks a week. I don't generally use that in my practice. When I'm working with somebody, the first thing we do is we just look at the behavior. How much are you drinking, and what's happening when you're drinking? How's it impacting your life? How's it impacting your work? How's it impacting your relationships? So we're not necessarily looking at the quantity, right? We're looking at how is it affecting your life? What's it doing to your life? And what do you want to do about that? And I'll often ask the individual, well, I mean, I want to be absent. For Mike Pond, life's just better when I don't drink. And so that's always my standard. I want to be abstinent. That's my harm reduction. But a lot of people that I see, they want to moderate, right? I still want to be able to drink. I still want to, have a glass of wine for dinner, or celebrate a little bit in these occasions like Thanksgiving and Christmas, et cetera. And so I'll look at that and say, well, let's look at how much you're drinking throughout the week, and let's just see if we can get that consumption down, right? And so we look at ways and techniques and strategies that they can use to just start to bring the consumption down. And then there's over time, so I'll say, look at the past month. How much did you drink? Or when did you drink? And what was happening this week when you had 2 days when you didn't drink? And what happened on the weekend when you had maybe too much to drink? And so we're trying to build in a real sense of what's happening so that they can look at it. And I meet them where they're at and go, let's move from here. And you'll be the one, right, that's going to make these determinations, right, of whether you're having some success and whether there's some positive change that's happening in your life. It really is about me working with that person to get them to see that they can be a powerful agent of their own change.
Maureen kind of winced for a second when she used the word willpower. She wondered if maybe she said, I might have just used a bad word there. What the heck's wrong with the word willpower? I thought that's what we're supposed to all be working on strengthening, isn't it?
Yeah, Maureen, why? Why did you wince?
Hi, why did I wince? I winced for a couple of reasons. Number one, brain imaging has shown us that willpower is a really complicated thing. It's driven a lot by biology, like the hundreds or thousands of times you slam back a martini or a glass of wine or beer. You are actually changing the circuitry in your brain so that you're entrenching addiction. So the more you drink, it's that much more difficult to access this thing called willpower. In chapter 17 of my book, it's all about medications that have been proven to help people sort of bolster their willpower. Medications like naltrexone that are rarely prescribed in Canada and have been proven to really be effective in things like reducing binge drinking. And if we realize that our people, our loved ones who are struggling with drinking, could access more of these evidence-based tools, we would be more helpful in bolstering their willpower. In the book, there's a QR code that will take you to a letter that's been created by the Canadian Alcohol Use Disorder Society. And it has a chart of all the medications that are effective. And it tells you to take this chart to your doctor. And it also outlines what the new Canadian guidance on treating alcohol is. So many doctors are so busy that they know very little about evidence-based treatment of addiction. And that's one of the reasons why I want to put these tools in family members' hands, because we're ultimately the ones that end up trying to solve this problem by ourselves.
Yeah, when we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, Maureen, I want to start with you because you've got your history. I mean, Mike, yeah, you're a psychotherapist, obviously, and you've got this science and counseling background. But Maureen, you're the producer. You're the award-winning senior producer. I mean, it's your job to be focused on facts more than anybody. And so I want to talk about like evidence-based approaches to this. We've got Kuby Is in our live chat here on YouTube who says cold turkey 100% enforced sobriety doesn't fit everyone. And I agree, Kuby Is. Says, as a guy who worked at a supervised consumption service, thank you for that, by the way, says that's my anecdotal experience. And I want to nail that down with Maureen Palmer and Mike Pond in just a second. You can check out YouDon'tHaveToQuit.com if you want to learn more about the book that they've just released. Again, Maureen as well, one of the co-founders of Bountiful Films. They've also produced a documentary by the same name, Wasted, for the CBC, for the nature of things. More with those two in just a quick second. First, I want to let you know that this conversation, important conversation, is happening with the support of our amazing friends at Friesen Brothers, who want to remind you, coming up October 21st and 22nd, an all-you-can-eat dinner. It's coming up this weekend, including Alberta beef rouladen, German-inspired Alberta chicken schnitzel, Ivan sausage with sauerkraut, German dumplings, German rye, sourdough buns, full salad bar, and a whole lot more. Just $25 per person, all you can eat at every Friesen Brothers Fresh Market store. They're coming up. You can check out the details from 4 to 8 p.m. There's more information again at friesen.com/Oktoberfest. Hey, if you're considering jumping back into your post-secondary journey, but you've been encountering some hurdles, perceived or otherwise, you're going, yeah, but like I've got a full-time job, or I'm looking after mom and dad, or I'm looking after the kids, or both. Or maybe you're nowhere close to a university. Athabasca U could be the perfect fit for you. Canada's Open University offers world-class accredited online degrees and courses designed so you can complete your education wherever and whenever it works for you. And by the way, for First Nation, Métis, and Inuit students in Canada, love this. At the beginning of September, AU's Board of Governors just approved a 10% reduction to tuition. For Indigenous peoples in Canada, you can learn more about that initiative, why they're doing it, at athabascau.ca/indigenous. And this is for those of you that are absolutely determined to get your life organized and to get your living space to a place where you just love it. Every time you open that door to come home, California Closets can get you on that track, and it all starts with a free consultation. No strings attached. You can book it online at californiaclosets.ca. Whether it's the boot room that you're vowing to get organized, maybe it's that nook in the house that could just be a perfect sunshine spot for that morning coffee. Maybe your primary bedroom could use that walk-in closet with everything so beautifully organized. Or heck, maybe it's your garage you're looking to transform. California Closets is the best in the business. Their work comes guaranteed for life, and they can work with any budget. You can request that free consultation today at californiaclosets.ca. We're hanging out with authors and professionals Maureen Palmer, Mike Pond. Their new book, You Don't Have to Quit, 20 Science-Based Strategies to Help Your Loved One Drink Less. They've also co-written a book, Wasted, an alcoholic therapist's fight for recovery in a flawed treatment system. Maureen, let's talk about what evidence-based means in this conversation. I think there's probably a lot of folks, including people that are going to watch or listen to this interview, that are going to have a whole lot of opinions on the right way to approach drinking or not drinking, sobriety, alcoholism, whatever the context. What did you learn as a detail and fact hunting producer in putting your documentary and your book together?
I learned that we have this strange dichotomy in our culture about how we treat addiction. The Canadian Mental Health Association and the American Mental Health Association call it a disease, but we don't treat it like a disease. Like for instance, cancer, we wouldn't diagnose it at stage 1 and wait until stage 4 to treat it. But waiting and withholding treatment until somebody is ready for it or is going to hit rock bottom is routine. So I thought that so much of what, and I came to understand, we believe about addiction is based in myth as opposed to evidence. So I went searching for the evidence. And I found that there's new behavioral therapies proven to have an impact on behavior change, and more importantly, sustained behavior change. I also learned about a wellspring of medications, ones that your listeners might be really familiar with, like gabapentin. Gabapentin at a dose of 1,800 milligrams a day dramatically reduces all the uncomfortable symptoms of withdrawing from alcohol. The biggest thing that I use in my day-to-day life, and not just in my relationship with Mike as it comes to alcohol, are the tools from motivational interviewing. It was invented about 30 years ago, and it's been the subject of over 200 randomized controlled trials in everything from dentistry to front office staff in therapy practices. It's been proven to help people change. And it does things that basically it makes me aware of my behavior. It has this thing called, I'm just going to give you an example, the rule: resist, understand, listen, and empower. And resist, I'll give you an example, is to resist the writing reflex. And my writing reflex with Mike sounds like this. If you work out more, if you meditate every day, if you would see fewer clients, you wouldn't be so stressed and you wouldn't be so reactive when you get to these periods where you might feel vulnerable to drinking. None of that is effective. What I actually end up doing is shutting him down. What I want to do in motivational interviewing is set the table for him to have his own agency, his own motivations for change. Ditto empathy. Like I just need to sit sometimes and listen. And for anybody who's known me, that's the challenge sometimes. I like talking. And my talking is not effective. So learning the tools of motivational interviewing, especially the stages of change. Dr. Miller identified various stages of change that if we know about them, we can work with them. And they are things called pre-contemplation, contemplation, preparation, action, and maintenance. And pre-contemplation sounds like, I don't have a drinking problem. I don't know why you're on my case all the time. I don't drink any more than my neighbors. That person is not yet receptive to a conversation about behavior change. Motivational interviewing teaches us how to help them get to receptivity. Ditto craft, community reinforcement, and family training. The 7 elements of positive communication changed my life. These things are proven in randomized control trials to work.
I want to get to, I mean, there's people are sharing incredible stuff in the live chat here, and I want to get to that, but some criticism, and sort of criticism always goes to the top of our list on feedback. I want to read. Alberta Girl says, this sounds like a show that is advocating enabling alcoholics. Mike, what would you say to Alberta Girl?
Well, Alberta Girl, I would challenge that. I understand what you're saying, but enabling typically comes up when it's a family situation, and let's say you're a parent and you have a child that has an alcohol problem, right? And you're doing things that that would be perceived as enabling, where, you know, I'm going to help them pay their light bill, right? I'm going to drive them to work, or I'm going to, so there's certain situations where you're actually, the belief is you're promoting them to drink, or it's making it okay. In fact, you're almost, helping them drink more. And so there's a huge problem with that, right? And we need to see that as, maybe I'm just a person that's doing my best. I love this person. This is my child. And I'm trying to act out of a place of love because I'm scared to death. Because let me tell you, this problem results, the rock bottom is death. And I was close to that myself several times. And so we need to look at why, well, first of all, why are we labeling this person as an alcoholic, and that somehow makes them deeply flawed or a diseased individual, when I'm just trying to do my best as a parent, as a loving parent, to try to keep my child alive.
Can I address this a little bit, Ryan?
Of course, please. Because Maureen, you know that some people that are listening to this are going to say, hang on a second, these two are together. Mike was on the streets 15 years ago. Why the hell does Maureen have a bottle of Chardonnay in the fridge, right? You know what I mean? Let's hit it head on. Yeah,
I should not have had a bottle of wine in the fridge. And not because in the context of enabling, but in the context of science. What I saw on Mike's brain scan at the Medical University of South Carolina, they put him in an fMRI and showed him pictures of drinks, alcoholic drinks, and milk and orange juice. And he said those alcohol drinks, they didn't register at all in his brain. But when we saw the brain scan, his brain had lit up like a Christmas tree only for the alcohol drinks. So even though Mike's conscious brain is not craving, his subconscious is doing something. If I want to bolster my family member's ability to not drink, I'm not going to have alcohol in the house. To me, that's healthy helping. Enabling and codependent are 2 words that have been thrown at me a lot, and I with kindness and a bit of humility, reject, because healthy helping is not being codependent or is not enabling. It's using new skills that move your person more, less shame-based and more healthily into drinking less. Calling somebody independent makes them not want to talk about helping their person. And if we all don't talk about it, nothing changes.
Can I just speak to that kind of personally as well, right? Because I was raised in a home where the father had a severe alcohol problem, right? And I was the oldest of four kids. And it was a scary place because of his drinking and what it created, for me and for my siblings. And then I developed the problem, and so did two of my siblings, right? So 3 out of the 4 of us developed this problem where we became alcoholics, right? And the difficult thing, and which is why now we don't even use that term on the DSM-5. It's called an alcohol use disorder, mild, moderate, or severe. So it's on kind of a continuum, right? So that we can look at that. 94% of the people that may have a problem with alcohol don't go and voluntarily seek help. Why is that? Why do 94% of us that have this problem, I had this problem, I did not go seek help, and I was in the helping field. That's all I've done my entire life. But because of the shame and because of the stigma and how deeply, deeply entrenched that is, and how it's become just such a huge part of the system at all levels, we walk around with this heavy load of shame, Ryan, because we have this problem and I'm an alcoholic. And it's just so much more effective for me personally. With my 2 of my sons have this problem. One is over 5 years now without a drink. The other one is really doing really, really well. And so there's an example. Well, why were 2 of my 3 boys reluctant, right, to seek out help? Why is that?
Well, it's also
because you saw how poorly you were treated.
Yeah, and
they watched how poorly I had been treated. Right,
yeah, and I guess also some people just either don't recognize it as a problem, or some people, quite frankly, just don't want to quit. Right, like it's that simple. Right, I mean, it's like I guess alcoholism. Now I'm all afraid I'm going to be using all the wrong words, but bear with me. But alcoholism, alcohol use disorder, whatever you want to call it, people smoking cigarettes. I mean, I think that both groups are aware that it's not proactively helping their health. But you talk to a lot of people that still smoke cigarettes, they just don't want to quit because they love smoking cigarettes. And it's that simple, right?
They get something out of it. So they
get something out of it, yes. Right? What do they get out of it? Why do they have this addiction? Why do they continue to, allow it to do whatever it's doing? How destructive it is in our lives, and why do we keep doing it? Which is the proverbial question around addiction, period, right? But my point is, by me being more open about, why would I just decide, okay, I'm going to let the world know that Michael Pond, the therapist who treats people with this problem, he's still drinking, right? I mean, no, I don't want to let anybody know that. And even in my work with my clients that are struggling, I'll say, I have episodes when I drink again, and they just go, what? You? And I said, yeah, I do. Right. And that's okay. As long as, I'm able to utilize my resources and the people in my life that love me and care about me, that we can just work through that and we're going to be okay. So what is the antidote for shame? Well, it's vulnerability. It's vulnerability. It's me being willing to and other people. And it's a relief to a lot of my clients to hear that, because, okay, so I can admit this, I can acknowledge this, and don't have to keep it a secret. It's the keeping it secret and the hiding and the strategizing and the manipulating, etc., that we do to get that drink that actually increases the severity of it, right? So when I'm open and honest and vulnerable, and I modeled that with my sons. And that over time invited them to become vulnerable themselves and admit that, okay, I do struggle with this, and I do need help, and I want help.
Can I talk a little bit about how I use vulnerability to build my bond with Mike?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm going to talk about a story. It's in the book, and a lot of people might be shocked by it, but I had gone away to the United States for a shoot for 4 days, and I came back and I found Mike severely detoxing, drinking alone in our guest room, and he'd been drinking for 4 days. And I was like so pissed off. I'm coming home, I'm tired. Why do I have to confront this? What can I do to make him stop? I went in there and I said, "Can I please take the bottle?" He said, "No, please don't, because if you do that, I might have a seizure. I've been drinking for 4 days. I've been trying for the last day to stop." And we argued about it. And he obviously was so depleted cognitively, we couldn't have a rational conversation. So I went away and I thought about it, and I came back and I said, "You keep the bottle and we will try and have this conversation tomorrow morning." I went back into our room to fall asleep, and about 10 minutes later, he came in and handed me the bottle.
Huh.
And I was like, "Oh my God, what's happened here?" And I realized I started to cry when I said, "You can keep the bottle." And Mike realized that I had made myself vulnerable to him. These people in our lives who drink are sometimes the strongest people we know, and they're so successful. And the last thing they want to do is be vulnerable. So I kind of think if we can show them ours, they'll show us theirs. And sometimes vulnerability is the key to opening every door where people can be compassionate with each other.
Mike, what prompted you to hand over the bottle there? What do you remember about that?
Well, it's vivid, the memory. Not even though I was like so sick and detoxing terribly, was that something heartfelt happened, right? This woman that I love and that loves me and that I know she only wants the best for me, and people want to call her codependent and call her enabler. I mean, how helpful is that? That those terms can be shaming in and of themselves. So when she demonstrated to me that she kind of felt and understood what I was experiencing, right? And I guess what happened was that gave me permission then to just be more open, right? And trusting. And the interesting part is these things that happen that can be perceived normally as really bad and uncomfortable and awful and what a terrible thing, became another event, another incident where it brought Maureen and I closer together and deepened our love for each other and our trust of each other. And that it's okay for me to let her know that I'm drinking, right? In fact, when I do that, and we then get this, I often say it's when the magic happens, right? Even when I'm working with clients, and I'll maybe do a bit of self-disclosure myself, and then it invites them to maybe open up and disclose something. And there's something that happens then in the dynamic of the relationship, Brian, that makes it deeper and makes them feel, we are then compelled to want to just make each other feel okay about what's going on here, and we'll get through it. Right.
Yeah, that's an unusual, I mean, or maybe not unusual, but it's a unique or probably uncommon circumstance for therapists to self-disclose that thing. I mean, you're volunteering to do heavier emotional lifting than maybe the average session might prompt, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a professional, and this is what I've done my entire life, right? Is mental health field, and we have standards of practice, and it's historically it's no, you're the professional, you're the clinician, right? And that's how this works. And you don't do much of your own personal disclosure. But in this particular problem, right, when I do that, and even writing the book, the first book, Wasted, it was like, I got colleagues and people that knew me really well and going, "Why are you doing this? Why are you disclosing, yourself like this?" And I said, well, if I'm going to tell this story about me and my life and what I've been through, then I'm going to tell it all, right? It's not going to be some of the truth or part of the truth. And the more transparent we are, and I'm at an age now where, I really don't care what people think of me anymore, right?
It's beautiful,
it's
isn't
none
it?
of my business. It's none of my business what they think of me. So all I know is how effective it is, how it helps the people that I work with to model that, right? For me, openness is what's going on inside of me. What is the truth? What's happening inside of me, right? What is it? And the hurt, the pain, the struggles, right? The fears, the anxieties, all of it. And so that's my truth. That's what's going on inside of me. And then when I disclose it, that's openness.
I want to, in closing, there's an interesting question from Travis in the chat. I want to ask you this because we're talking about, and if you're just joining us on the live streaming Mixler audio app presented by California Closets, talking to Maureen Palmer and Mike Pond, co-authors of You Don't Have to Quit, 20 science-based strategies to help your loved one drink less. And so here's the question from Travis, and this is one I think that we'll leave the audience with because this is the one you got to ruminate on to decide whether or not this journey is for you, right? He wonders, are all drinkers problem drinkers? Like, what is the correct amount? What behaviors would constitute the correct relationship with alcohol? You could flip it around and ask what behaviors constitute an unhealthy relationship with alcohol. Some of it's obvious. Some of it's obvious. Like, Mike, when you're living on the street downtown East Side Vancouver, you have a bit of a clue that you don't have, that your relationship with alcohol is, I'm not poking fun, but like, it's not.
Maybe I should do something about this
right?
problem.
Yes. If it's your third DUI and you've just wrapped your car around a pole, if you've lost your job for drinking vodka behind your desk, some things are obvious. But Maureen, what's like an evidence-based answer to the question that Travis asks?
There is a definition from Dr. Gabor Mate. And it's that the drinking continues and builds despite ongoing negative consequences. And to me, if Mike's drinking were to become problematic again, there'd be long periods where I would be consistently being treated poorly, or other people in Mike's life. And to me, that is the bellwether. If your relationships are good, if you can show up for your job and not feel the impacts of alcohol, if you're managing your affairs, you might still drink too much, but you probably don't have a dependence. And then it's up to you. How do I want to protect myself from the over 200 conditions that alcohol can create? Physical and mental health conditions, because the new Canadian guidance on alcohol and health says no amount of alcohol is safe. So I think it's up to every individual to decide, how much do I want to drink? And we don't want to shame those people as they progress on a journey, which Dr. Miller says most people who moderate end up mostly quitting or quitting outright.
Mostly sober, yeah.
And like, there's going to be a lot of people, like we said, this month, this time of year, there have been some effective campaigns to get people just to like check in on their relationship with alcohol, to reevaluate it, to sort of like hit pause for 4 weeks and see how you feel. And I bet you some will never go back. But Mike, what would you leave the audience with? What would you leave us with in the context of Travis's question of how do you know if your relationship is healthy or unhealthy?
A big part for me is, a lot of it is to just sit and reflect on it, right? And what's happening, and being able to kind of look at your life and realize that, okay, there's these problems, but you know what? I can be the agent of change in my own problems here, right? And the other piece is the families have so much influence, right, over individuals, their loved ones that have this problem. And they don't know, or they don't realize it, or they've been told that they're enablers or codependents. I would really want families to hear this, that you do have tremendous influence in changing your loved one's problems, right? And helping them change. And when you act from kindness and compassion, and you use some of the strategies that Maureen describes in the book, you will find change. It will happen. It will just happen.
I want to thank the both of you. We kept you way longer than we asked, which I appreciate. Number one, thanks for waking up early, way out on Canada's stunningly beautiful West Coast. We've been watching the sunrise over your shoulder, Maureen, through that window. Yeah. But thanks for waking up early for us. Congratulations on the book, YouDon'tHaveToQuit.com. Both of you getting so personal, talking about your relationship, and then obviously applying what you've learned over decades and decades in mental health therapy and journalism. It really is an excellent work. You Don't Have to Quit, 20 science-based strategies to help your loved one drink less. You've been listening to Maureen Palmer and Mike Pond on the show. Thank you for doing this. We appreciate it.
Love the opportunity. Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you, Ryan.
Yeah, you bet. I never take it for granted when folks are willing to just go talk about their own personal journey. And Mike, what an interesting one to be, a therapist, to lose his therapy practice to drinking and then to find his way back. I wanted to acknowledge the live chat. And Johnny, I know you've been in the chat throughout here, and a lot of people really sharing stuff that means a lot to us. With your real names, your last names are there. You're telling your stories. Kathy says there's a history of alcoholism in my family. So it's been a conscious choice for me, says Kathy, to not drink, as I've seen firsthand what it's done. And it was a very big discussion when my husband and I first got together. Yeah, no kidding. And that's got to be, kind of a family decision in a lot of ways, right? Tracy says this panel had me in tears right out of the get-go. Tony says I had to cut ties with a close friend who's a so-called functioning alcoholic. Sober, one of the nicest guys you'd ever meet. Drunk, he's mean and a total asshole. He lost his family and he continues to drink. A lot of you. Erica says alcohol is so insidious because in the short term, it does its job amazingly well. Yeah, that's really well said, Erica. I'd probably say the same thing about cocaine if you know people that use it, and then after the fact, completely different reality, right? Wise Kyle, who told me his story in person and is sharing now in the chat, says he's been hit by a drunk driver. Not just hit by a drunk driver. Kyle, you tell as much as you want, but Kyle was rear-ended at a stop by someone going highway speed and changed his life forever. Kyle says, so has my mom. He says, I can't stand drinking and driving. Alberta Girl says, unresolved trauma is not an excuse to drink. It's a sign you need to do the work on the trauma. Michael says, for me, I enjoy the occasional beer or glass of wine. I can still count them on one hand how many drinks I've had this year, says Michael. But I do understand why others just love drinking. It's a very social activity. That's it for me. Like, I feel like I'm not the type that would, sort of like sneak drinks. I'm not, you hear of some folks that, they're like hiding the vodka bottles from their family, or they're sneaking booze into their drinks at work or things like that, using alcohol to function. You see those. I went down a rabbit hole one day on YouTube finding, stories of teachers that had been brought into, counseling offices, and they got a police officer there with a breathalyzer. The teacher gets breathalyzed in the middle of the workday and blows like a .24 and is fired on the spot. That's not it for me, but for me, the social side of it is to be quite honest. You think of a kind of a life of like a teetotal life of swearing off all alcohol for good forever. And the way I'm wired, I'm just quite frankly not interested in that.
I think most people, that's probably, if not the top, one of the top reasons that it's so hard to quit, is because you have friends who maybe don't have the same inklings as you. They can have one drink on a holiday, like someone in the chat was saying. They can have a beer after work to relax and go to bed and not turn it into a Tuesday bender. But I really liked hearing from Mike, because I feel like if I had this problem and I needed a psychotherapist, that I would want someone who'd been through it and who also went back and forth on the pendulum. And I also realized that, I know some people they have an extreme addiction and they need to stop cold turkey. But we also know that stopping cold turkey, especially nowadays, we know that's not how you get through something. You can't just stop drug addict. If you're addicted to heroin, you can't just the next day stop and everything's fine. There's stuff you go through. There's weaning processes that have to take place. And I think we're starting to realize nowadays, and I'm not enabling alcoholism or saying that everyone's journey is like this, but some people can realize they have a problem and then come back to it and be like, maybe I've got a hold on it now. Maybe I can have a drink every now and then. I'm not saying it's that way for everyone, and especially a lot of people who, family, life ruining stuff, that's probably not the journey they want to be on, but it's nice to at least to be able to have the talk about it, that that life can exist for some people, 100%.
Right? Yeah. On the cold turkey front, Tracy in our chat says cold turkey sometimes feels as toxic as the opposite.
Oh, it's bad.
It's from one extreme to another.
Worst.
But then I also saw Sharon. I mean, maybe we're talking apples and oranges with alcohol and tobacco, but we're talking about substance use. We're talking about addiction. We're talking about mental health. Sharon said that 30 years ago, she said she loved cigarettes, didn't want to quit, decided to cold turkey, and she's been now 30 years tobacco free, which is really phenomenal as well. I think different things for different folks. I was telling you,
yeah, but nowadays we got vaping and zinning. There's different things you can do to get out of there without causing that. There's a lot of trauma that can happen when you just tell your body, I'm not going to do this anymore. Well, it can actually do the reverse effect and make you even sicker. Right?
And we've talked a lot on this show about interesting political news. I recognize this show is largely politics, and
we are not
seems
doctors,
to kind of find its way back. Yeah, we're definitely not doctors nor addictions therapists.
No.
But the premier of Alberta, Danielle Smith, her chief of staff, has just left. And there's some questions around the circumstances of his departure, Marshall Smith. But he shares a similar story. I certainly don't speak for Marshall, but shares a similar story to Mike in that he too was living on the street and kind of got his life back together and ultimately rose to a very prominent political position. Now, some of the rumblings that he may be going to work for Pierre Poilievre, other rumblings that he may be stepping out of politics. I think a lot of folks wondering if that relationship has soured and if perhaps once the severance runs out, if we might hear a little bit more from Marshall Smith. I don't know. But he is essentially, based on his personal experience, the architect of Alberta's approach to addictions recovery. And a lot of people are praising it and celebrating it, including Pierre Poilievre. And quite frankly, a lot of people that work in the space of addictions and mental health are very critical of the so-called Alberta model because it is one of these, if I can as a civilian sum it up, it's like a pull yourself up by the bootstraps. You got to quit. You got to get off it. You got to go to rehab. You got to go to detox. You got to get off the booze. You got to get off the drugs.
Straight jacket in a white room for a week, and then you're fine.
There's not a lot of room. There's not a lot of bandwidth. There's not a lot of funding. There's not a lot of resources around harm reduction. Things like Kuby was talking about earlier, supervised consumption services. And, you talk to people, the show's done dozens of shows on this, talking to addictions recovery specialists, harm reduction specialists, healthcare professionals that will say, one of the most important things you can do with the opioid epidemic in particular, I recognize we're not talking about alcohol, but, is, and we look at these deaths from poison supply. We look at the overdose deaths across the country, and it is an epidemic. We're losing thousands of Canadians every year, people whose lives have value. One of the issues there is that there is not a realistic outcome for many people who use drugs to simply swear off the drugs, to simply go in and get off it cold turkey, or to check themselves into a rehab or detox program. But if you have a harm reduction resource like supervised consumption, that's one example. You're building relationships with people. You're ensuring that the drugs are, that the supply is not poison, and if it is, that an overdose can be reversed with naloxone or other. So there are, this all comes down to, doesn't it? Relationships, communication,
100%.
Empathy.
100%. And those relationships, I don't know how it works in supervised consumption sites. I would hope that the people working there are also trying to talk to these people. They're probably trained in some form of therapy, and that they're trying to get you. Because I also recognize that this is multifaceted. You don't just pick a way to quit alcohol and then you're done. Travis even mentioned in the chat, there's a reason. Oh, my camera's stalled. You have to find the root causes. You have to find, am I an alcoholic just because I like alcohol? Probably not. There's probably a reason, like Mike was saying, that I'm numbing some part of the pain, that I'm stress relieving, that I'm doing all these things. And I think that is the trick to And all this fighting back and forth on the left and the right and here in Alberta, like, let's just figure it out. Let's give people all the tools. Let's not say this is the right way. Yeah. Let's give them the therapy. Let's give them the weaning. Let's give them the supervised consumption. Let's give them all the tools, because you're going to need a big tool belt to beat these things, especially when you're talking about addiction to hard drugs.
In a perfect world, we could depoliticize these types of things.
Never.
Unfortunately, these types of things require funding. Unfortunately, these types of things require political capital and political support. I can't remember. Did I just read these internally, or did I read them on the show? 80s Fanify says, looking at my family's experience, there's very few that can handle moderate drinking. The more severe examples also had issues with impulse control.
I don't know about that. My mom's a moderate drinker.
Well, no, but
she's never been a big drinker.
But they're talking
she has
about
a glass of wine,
experience.
and that's it. But I'm just saying it can exist.
Yeah,
right? It does exist.
I mean, sure. Yeah. I mean, like, who was it? Michael just a while ago said he could count on one hand the amount of drinks he's had this year.
Sure.
I can count on one hand the amount of drinks I've had since Sunday, so that's good.
That's great.
Erica says, my husband self-medicated heavily with alcohol. He didn't drink to party. He didn't drink to socialize. He didn't drink to enjoy a beer with a burger. He drank for one reason, to quiet the demons.
Yeah. So people have different stories, right?
Totally. And there are some folks in here, I wish I could remember who it was, but some folks in here are talking about the 12-step plan. Alcoholics Anonymous says, if you're not familiar with it, don't criticize it, this, that, and the other. Listen, whatever works for you.
Yeah.
I know for a lot of people, and this is just anecdotal, this is what I've heard, a lot of people, there is that kind of sort of religious element to Alcoholics Anonymous that doesn't necessarily work for everybody. That's fine. If it doesn't work for you, it doesn't work for you. If it does work for you, praise God. That's fantastic, right? Isn't that great? And I love this from Lou. Lou Jobs, who's such a wonderful friend of the show. Lou, we have your beautiful stone carving in our studio that reminds us of your powerful story every single day. Lou, a beloved member of this audience who came on the show on December 21st of 2022. And he was here to talk about his journey as a survivor of the 60s scoop. And Lou just shared a remarkably powerful story on the show. That's our December 21st episode of 2022. And Lou here says on the chat that he's not 100% convinced that there is a chemical solution to a spiritual problem, which I think is very well said, Lou. And I appreciate you sharing that again. He says, I'm not talking about being religious. He says, rather, I do think that we need to talk about fixing the broken human spirit, which is really well said.
Again, I think, like, I'm not talking about every instance, but in most instances, people think of, like, why are you an alcoholic? Well, I partied for, 2 years and just became addicted to it, and I just needed it as medicine. Yeah. I think most times, not all times, people are masking stuff, like Maureen was talking about. There's some other underlying issue, whether it's stress, whether it's depression, whether it's fear, whether it's pain from something that happened in your life. Yeah. And I think I'm not saying that everyone should work things out and then they'll be okay to drink alcohol, but if you can relieve those symptoms first, I think you'll have a better relationship with having a glass of wine at Christmas.
80s Fanify in the chat says, kind of sad to see a lot of judgment still happening. Meantime, Justin, heart on his sleeve, unapologetically in the chat, says, I've lost an uncle to alcoholism, but even then, I have a hard time finding a lot of sympathy for addicts that continue to choose substance abuse. He says, I know that might be a callous position, but I just have a hard time caring. At least you're being honest, man. I appreciate that at the very least. It's interesting. Like, even in when we do interviews like this, understanding more about language and phrases and how relapse is not like a preferred term, or falling off the wagon. I saw somebody say, Leslie says, my mom used to keep her bottle under the bed. Says, I didn't really partake in alcohol until I was in my late 30s. Leslie says, I have a drink once in a while socially, but I much prefer cannabis. But again, in moderation. Yeah, like Oscar Wilde said, right? And then Nikki Sixx reiterated it years later. Everything in moderation, including moderation. Yeah, Leslie, stick around, by the way. We have a couple of your photos coming up in just a minute. Absolutely stunning. Ms. B says, it's really strange to me that the guest this morning, Mike, was so adamant that this model works when the model that actually worked, according to his story, was harm reduction that others did for him until he was ready. You can let us know, by the way, if you're hearing this later, the majority of our audience is not in the live chat. You can always send us an email to talk@ryanjespersen.com, or you can leave a comment on our YouTube episodes. We appreciate that, or on any of our social media platforms. You can follow Real Talk RJ on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. Dwayne says, 0 alcoholic beverages for me for 26 years this month. Same thing with coffee. That is a whole different ball game, pal. That is an entirely different ball game.
Yeah.
Remember, you were on your.
I would think you would need the coffee. That's the first thing you go for at the AA meeting, isn't it?
There are
pot of
people.
coffee?
Well, and there's people talking in the chat about trading addictions one for another.
Yeah.
You like I'm not sure, and I know you're doing it in good faith. I know you're not trying to get anybody hooked on anything else, but you say there's a lot of tools. You want to quit smoking. You go, there's vaping, there's Zins, and
I'll be honest. Like,
vaping is its own.
Yeah.
We don't even know how bad vaping is.
No,
yet, right?
we don't. And it's crazy. 2 weekends ago, I talked to a doctor at a wedding, and he was outside vaping. And I was like, why are you vaping? He's like, stress, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, I gotta know. Like, cause I'm someone who used to smoke, not heavy, not like a pack a day, 3-4 cigarettes a day. Now I used vaping to get off it. I've never wanted another cigarette since. And so I just asked him, like, you're vaping, you're a doctor. He's like, I have stress too. I'm not going to do it for my whole life. But he just went down the list of ways to get off tobacco and what they do. And it was crazy to me that he said, if you really want to get off tobacco, but still have tobacco Zins.
Yeah.
So nicotine pouches. I said, why? He said, 0 cancer risk. And I'm like, you can say that? Like, you're credible enough to say that? He's like, 0 risk. He's like, vaping, there's a risk. Smoking tobacco is obviously the highest risk. Chewing tobacco is also a risk. But he's like, zinning, there's no risk for cancer. And I'm like, so it's great? He's like, well, no, there's also heart problems, hypertension, all these other things. But
yeah,
I mean, that's another thing where I see that, like, it's the cold turkey thing. I don't think it works for anyone with anything really.
Yeah.
Most people I know who've gotten off things. It does.
I mean, except for the people that it does.
I mean, sure.
You know what I mean? Sure. Like, I just, it's kind of funny. Maybe I'm being a little bit skittish right now, but I
feel like it's the hardest road.
It does work.
Though,
I do for a person like me. And by the way, let me correct this real quick. Ms. B jumped back in the chat, said, "Sorry, I was talking about Marshall Smith, not your guest." When she said that he's criticizing a system that actually worked for him. So Ms. B, thanks for the clarification. I wanted to jump on that one, but I just think that for me, it's like, whatever's working for you. If it's working, then it works, and that's great. But, I do think that this is the reason why we chose to do this. The reason we're doing this episode right after Thanksgiving is that I do think that this is the time of year following a big family holiday or a big sort of a moment on that calendar, plus the month of October where a lot of people are evaluating their relationship with alcohol. Mm-hmm. And this is something where even
a lot of people start now and they go till like around Christmas.
Totally.
Right? Like, yeah.
But then for a lot of other people, like we heard the comment earlier today, when you're heading into a stressful situation, maybe it's like, family members that aren't getting along, or maybe it's just the aunts that you can't stand talking to, or maybe it's like your kids are driving you up the wall, or maybe whatever it is, maybe financial troubles are closing in, and it's just like, like an audience member said earlier, like alcohol in the short term is so effective.
Yeah.
Right. It's just like in the short term.
That really rang true when I heard I heard that phrase. But again, I'll go back to it. Like, you need the tool belt. Like, maybe, I don't know, maybe you can meditate, or like, there's got to be a bunch of things you can do to try first before you have a drink.
Yeah.
Like, here's all my things. And then at the end, I'll have a glass of wine before I talk to Aunt Karen, right?
Yeah. Well, of course you had to pick Karen. Well, poor Karens around the world.
There's drunk uncle too. We all know them.
Yeah, the drunk uncles. Yeah, exactly. And hey, I mean, we're not. I mean, unless this is what you need, we're not sitting here sort of calling for teetotaling. I'd be lying if I told you that I was teetotaling. Shout out to my wife, Carrie. She's on a sober journey now herself. She's decided like that's just something that she wants to do. And so we stopped by our friends at Vine Arts before we headed out to the farm for the weekend and picked up some de-alcoholized wine. She's still kind of making up her mind on that. She's like, it doesn't kind of taste, and then, picked up some de-alcoholized. Our friends at Ole Originals do these de-alcoholized chili mango margaritas. And
I was at a wedding this weekend. I had that 0% Corona. I just tried to do it instead.
What'd you think about it?
It was great. It was fine. Tastes like alcohol. To everyone else, it looks like you're having a great time. But, I was the DJ. I was a little tired. I didn't want to be weighed down. I was driving. So I went for those. And it's kind of like if you hold your hand around it, nobody knows. And I think that's the other thing we were talking about today. Socially, for people who aren't, masking pain, who maybe became an alcoholic from partying, I think that's the hardest part. You go out with a friend you haven't seen in years. What's the first thing you want to do? Meet me for a drink.
Have you seen this place that just opened just down the road from us on Jasper Avenue? Spilt, it's called. They're not paying for this. We're just mentioning it, but you can check out spilt.ca. It's Alberta's first mocktail bar.
Oh, here we go.
So
my partner would love this. She
it's
doesn't
a sober
drink.
bar.
Yeah, she doesn't drink.
So isn't that neat? Like
perfect.
you still, I'd be curious to see. I wish them well. I wish all startups well. I'd be curious to see like how well attended that will be.
I'm sure this will be popular. I know a lot of people these days who are not, especially young kids, they aren't into anything. They don't drink. They go out to bars and zinning is coming up again. But a lot of them, they put in a Zin pouch. It gives them a bit of an upper, a little boost, and that's it. They don't drink. And I think that's a great thing. I did see, I was looking up alcohol rates while you guys were talking, and they are down, but I don't know if we can, North American rates I'm looking at in Canada, but I don't think we can weigh into that right now because there was such a surge during COVID that I think it had to have come down. So I don't think those numbers are like, they're not showing that like people are drinking less. It's just less since the pandemic.
Kimberly's sharing in here, says she quit drinking for 9 years and then drank for 25 years, mostly, she says, without issue until the pandemic when drinking alone took a hold. Kimberly, I have no problem saying, like, I experienced the same thing. I've told you this before. Like, my drinking habits during COVID just went to another level because it just kind of started as like an antidote to boredom. Like, and it was like, it was fun things like, we would as friends, we had this group, right? And I think there was like 8 of us or maybe 10 of us. And each week somebody would put together a different craft cocktail and then they would put it was so work intensive, but it was so much fun. And they'd get these little like oyster cups and tiny little mason jars and things like that. And you'd put all the ingredients for the cocktail into a paper bag and then drop them off. Can you believe this? And then drop them. Everybody lived in the same neighborhood. Yeah. Drop them off on the doorsteps, and then everybody would meet on a Zoom call, and we'd have like a COVID happy hour, and everybody would mix the cocktail together and try the cocktail. It was super fun. And then I started mixing up quarantinis. Like I shake a pretty good martini, don't I? Mm-hmm. And so I'd start having quarantinis, except for like, we can't go out at all, and we're home by ourselves, and there's nothing going on. So all of a sudden, the quarantinis are like, 3.5 ounces of vodka at like 2 p.m. on a Tuesday. Mm-hmm. And then after you've had one, you're probably gonna have 2. And if you have 2, you're definitely gonna have 3. Yeah. And then, and it's just this kind of thing where you were so out of your normal routine. Mm-hmm. You were stuck at home. There was nothing else going on. And I think that it, in my personal experience, it doesn't take long to get to a whole other level where if you actually were like marking on a chart every drink that you had through the week, the number, for me anyway, at some points during COVID would have been absolutely astounding and huge red flags. Alcohol rates skyrocketed. And I think that tells a story there too, what you're talking about. Because everyone kind of did it for boredom at first. But as time went on, when this thing lasted as long as it did with the lockdowns and people not going to work, it originally was to mask boredom. Then it became to mask anxiety and fear of COVID and fear of losing my job. Maybe I'm never going back to my job. Fear of how am I going to pay the bills? How am I going to pay the government back if I take this money that they're offering me? So it became, a way to cope with all of that. And then, of course we're seeing, I know a lot of people who, well, not a lot of people, but I know people who, they still haven't come out of the style of, they're not drinking every day, but it definitely increased the amount that they drink because of the pandemic. Yeah. Sharon's reminding us that some of us during the pandemic chose to bake bread instead. Fair enough, Sharon. Fair enough. Ben Demon Hunter is absolutely correct, saying that he's read and seen reports that young adults, today's youth, between 18 and 25 or so, that age range, drink significantly less than previous generations during that same age frame. And that's absolutely true. Mm-hmm. Today's youth are on a different track.
They're totally, and I see this because I still occasionally go back and play the clubs and talk to them, and I see them at weddings because people are, there, and they're on a different mindset. A lot of them don't need the things we needed when we were growing up to have a good time. They don't need all the booze, all the drugs, and when they do it, they've got a better, I'm not going to say a better handle on it, but at least the ones that I've seen, they seem to be navigating it better than we ever did. Whereas when we grew up, it was like you just went to the bar and everyone smoked and everyone drank.
100%.
And it was just, that's just the way it was.
It does feel like
if you went to the bar, you were a drinker and you were most likely a smoker as well.
It does feel like everybody smoked back. And I know not everybody did, but it did feel like it. It feels like
it's the weirdest feeling.
Today, if a buddy busts out a cigarette, people are like, what are you doing?
Exactly. No matter where it is.
What are you doing?
Go in the alleyway. Nobody wants to smell or hear.
In my bartending days, which weren't too, I guess they were 20 years ago, but it doesn't feel like that. But like people just firing out like we would do. Like
I'll never forget.
I remember emptying ashtrays as part of my job, like just smoking everywhere. Can you imagine lighting up a smoke in a restaurant right now?
I'll never forget smoking on dance floors. And I don't think we'll ever be able to explain to young people nowadays who've just turned 18, 19, 20, 21 in North America who are going to bars that people used to smoke. You'd get burned on your shoulder. Like on the dance floor, there would be people either holding them up because they were conscious about it, or you just got burned. Everyone smelled like cigarettes when they went home. The people were smoking absolutely everywhere.
Wild. Now listen, I'm not advocating for teetotaling. This next tweet I want to mention and photos I want to show you might seem weird after talking about alcohol, but we're talking about, moderation. We're talking about finding out what's right for you. And I did notice an early comment in this episode from Lauren who said, beer brings people together. And I know exactly what Lauren's talking about, and I just wanted to give a shout out. I tweeted this over the weekend that I love hearing about real talkers that meet in the wild, real talkers that meet in real life. And we've been talking to you about this True Joy Irish Red Ale that Arcadia Brewing Company in Edmonton is putting out. We're not promoting this, getting paid. We're not, we have no interest financially in this. We're just supporting it because obviously it's a tribute to my fallen pal, Tim Losnick. And that right there is Darren McGowan, who's the owner of Arcadia Brewing Company, and he's showing the fellas this is Lozzie, and this is Lozzie's favorite surfboard. You can see that with the red lightning bolt on the beautiful yellow board, and that was what inspired the design of these cans. This is one of our favorite photos of Loz, and of course you can see both of those are worked into the can design of the True Joy Irish Red Ale at Arcadia. How cool is this that Lauren and Travis, that are both prominent and regular contributors in our live chat, happened to meet in real life at Arcadia while they were each picking up a 4-pack of the True Joy Irish Red Ale. I just wanted to thank both of you for doing that and everybody else that's done it. I heard that they're getting close to selling out already. The benefits the financial donation going to Wounded Warriors. They've got a campaign that specifically provides mental health resources and supports for first responders, including members of Canada's military, firefighters, and others. And I just wanted to thank the two of you. It's kind of nice to see what they look like in real life. Isn't it? We're kind of blowing their cover here.
And thanks, guys, for staying true to your word, because they both said in the chat they were going to head over, and then boom.
Absolutely love it. So we sure appreciate that. If this conversation has prompted something with you, or you'd be interested in talking to us about your journey with whether it's booze, cigarettes, drugs, whatever the case may be. It could be gambling. Remember we had that really, really powerful Real Talk Roundtable. I think it was about 6 months ago on gambling addiction. That was also a fascinating conversation as well, prompted by an Alberta Views feature. You can send us an email to talk@ryanjespersen.com. As we wrap this episode, first, I want to remind you about a couple of sponsors that have made this possible, and then we're going to get into some photos. It seems like everybody was sharing these remarkable Aurora Borealis photos over the last week or so. And
beautiful.
Some real talkers submitted theirs to us, and we just had to show them off. But first, I want to remind you that Jasper is wide open for business. Obviously, a lot of the businesses and a lot of the residents there are still huge life interruptions, and they're working to get their lives back. But some of the businesses that have their doors open now, welcoming visitors back to the national park, are able to do so because of the amazing work of the teams at Complete Care Restoration. They've got more than a quarter century of experience restoring property and rebuilding peace of mind, ready to respond 24/7 across the province. They've got teams that are set up there in Hinton, working out of Jasper to get that work done. And it's just amazing to know that so many Jasper residents are in such good hands. We've seen this team work firsthand, and we recommend them without hesitation. If you're experiencing fire, flood damage, sewer backups, smoke damage, mold, asbestos, you name it, they can do it. You can find them online at completecarerestoration.ca. And for those of you that are obviously always keeping an eye on where politicians are spending their money. No, your money. That's right. The more than 6,000 members of Civic Service Union 52 want you to know about their Edmonton for Everyone campaign. You can check it out online at edmontonforeveryone.ca. They want to make sure that the money is getting spent wisely in Alberta's capital city. They're asking you to help contribute your thoughts by way of their website on what a smart, thoughtful decision would look like when it comes to the city budget. These are 911 operators we're talking about, accessible transit operators, public library technicians, rec center operators, and the like. As Edmonton grows at a rapid pace, they want to remind you we can't afford to lose sight of what really matters, and that is how every dollar spent needs to be an investment in what keeps Edmonton thriving. For more details, check out edmontonforeveryone.ca.
Shout out to the vaping doctor who I met at the wedding, Tyler. I'll never forget that. I was just like, because you remember it used to be like, you'd walk in to get an exam in the 50s and your doctor would be smoking. But nowadays you think of them as like probably the most healthy people, because they have, unlimited amount of research that shows everything why you shouldn't be. But it was first health professional I met in a while who I was like, wow, you're vaping. He's like, we all have stress. But
like the health professionals are still humans. Like,
of course.
I've had, whatever. I'm not going to get into it. Doesn't matter. But I was going to talk about a very unhealthy healthcare professional I dealt with, but that's not productive. Why would I do that? Why would I do that? Before we get to positive reflections, this was a story that I think the political watchers, and again, we recognize there's a lot going on right now. Tomorrow's show, before we wrap, I'll let you know we're going to talk to two longtime foresters that were just in Ottawa, appearing before a parliamentary committee to talk about the response, not just the response to the Jasper wildfire, but how the national park was being managed leading up to that. We're also keeping an eye on the RCMP statement that India is behind some obviously violent crimes in the country. And of course, we're going to take a look as well at some Albertans that have been making big contributions down in the state of Florida after Milton tore through there. They're estimating $100 billion damage. Did you see that? Unbelievable. But here's a local story that I think a lot of people are going to, how much longer is Edmonton's Mayor Amarjeet Sohi going to allow this to happen? There's been an online, he's a YouTube content creator. I'm not going to call him a journalist because his content, and some of you have reached out to us saying, you got to get this guy on the show. Some of you have suggested that I didn't have the balls to get this guy on the show because he's been pushing out these episodes on Mayor Sohi's so-called corruption, on how his brother owns a trucking company, and essentially they were saying that when Sohi was a federal minister, his brother was getting trucking contracts, based on Sohi, nepotism, and this, that, and the other. Well, Edmonton's mayor, and I think, and I don't speak for his staff, and I sure don't speak for the mayor, my guess is that the mayor was kind of maybe hoping that this would either go away or feeling that if he were to sue, that it might shine more of a light on it. In other words, it might make it worse. Well, CBC's Madeline Cummings reporting that the mayor is indeed suing 3 Edmontonians for defamation, alleging that Verinder Bhular, Bob Rai, and Abdul Salam Bajgirian repeated false statements about him to damage his reputation. The statement of claim was filed Friday after everybody was on their way to Thanksgiving weekend in the Edmonton Court of King's bench, representing that Bajgirian in particular, who represents himself as a journalist, launched this video series on YouTube, the one I was talking about, around false claims that Sohi is involved in serious criminality and corruptions. Verinder Bhular is an interesting story as well. again, I'm not speaking on behalf of anybody here, but this guy sought a Liberal nomination. Back in the day, he wanted to be the Liberal nominee in a federal election in the riding where Amarjeet Sohi had been acclaimed. And he was super pissed off about that. As a matter of fact, he used to write me letters all the time when I was hosting my show on that terrestrial radio station. So he's one of those behind this as well that's also being sued by Edmonton's mayor. So we're going to keep an eye on this. It's not unprecedented, but it certainly is notable when a mayor is suing residents of his city for defamation. But I think that this has probably been a long time coming. I was wondering, this content creator, this guy that's pushing these videos out on YouTube, there are opportunities to get a lot of clicks with stories that could grab people's attention, but you've always got to have in the back of your mind. I mean, I watched a couple of them going, how does he think he's going to get away with this? Like, this guy is just asking for a lawsuit. None of these allegations have been proven in court, and we'll see how this plays out, but that is a story certainly that we're going to keep an eye on. Every week, the first episode of every week, courtesy of our friends at Kuby Renewable Energy, we press pause on the news cycle and we take a look at something that just fills our bucket. We sort of renew our faith in humanity, so to speak, courtesy of our friends at Kuby Renewable Energy. It's Positive Reflections, and I want to give a shout out to a couple of Real Talkers that made sure that we saw their captures of the Northern Lights, the Aurora Borealis, over the past several days, including Leslie Bergen, who sent these to us. For the podcast listeners, this is one where you got to swing on by our YouTube channel and check these out, because this is absolutely stunning. I mean, I've seen Northern Lights, Johnny, lots of greens and blues.
This doesn't even look real. This
doesn't
is
even,
insane.
I mean, the reds and the what do we say, magenta? What are the colors? The purples. I mean, This is absolutely stunning. Leslie sent these to us and thought, I wondered if maybe Real Talkers might want to see it. You think, Leslie? Unbelievable. Beautifully captured, beautifully done. Was your Facebook and Instagram feeds like just absolutely populated with Aurora Borealis?
I had FOMO the whole time.
How cool was it that people were seeing them? I mean, Leslie's looks rural here, but some of them right in the heart of the city, including these next ones. And I wanted to give a shout out, first of all, to Leslie. Thanks for submitting these to talk@ryanjespersen.com, but to Jeff Nash as well. We call him Nasher. He just celebrated his birthday. Look at this. Like, I've never seen a photo of the Northern Lights like this. Nash managed to fit in the high level, or rather the Walterdale Bridge. He's got the Alberta legislature. There's got an element of Edmonton's downtown skyline. He's got the shores of the North Saskatchewan, and then the Northern Lights dancing over top. Look at those fall leaves on the right-hand side of the frame, just beautifully lit.
Beautiful.
I mean, I've never seen a photo of the Northern Lights quite like that, Nasher. So congratulations. Thanks for bringing that to our attention, and thanks for sharing with us on Positive Reflections. You can send us a story, a photo, a video, whatever it is that just made your day, one you know the audience would love to hear, to talk@ryanjespersen.com. Make sure you punch Positive Reflections into the subject line. It's proudly presented by our friends at Kuby Renewable Energy. Coming up on the next episode of Real Talk, we're going to talk to Emile Bégin and Ken Hodges. Between the two of them, 8 decades of forestry experience, and years before that massive Jasper wildfire, they called it. As a matter of fact, they kind of put Parks Canada on notice with a letter, an open letter, saying that things needed to change. Well, I don't need to tell you that things didn't change, and Jasper experienced one of Canada's worst natural disasters. The two of them are going to join us on tomorrow's show, hot off that appearance in Ottawa in front of that parliamentary committee. We're going to dig into the details. That's coming up on tomorrow's Real Talk, plus an exclusive with former Team Heartthrob, Corey Feldman. Yeah, you heard me right. Corey Feldman coming up on Wednesday's Real Talk. We'll talk to you then.
Real Talk is hosted by Ryan Jespersen, executive producer Josh Dunford, technical producer John Hicks, general manager Katie Cook-Chivers, account coordinator Lawrence Derlego.